The night sky over Earth was alive with strange lights. People ran into the streets to watch the giant ships floating above the clouds. They were not human ships. They were alien war cruisers, black and silver with glowing red marks like scars. Across their hulls, the world held its breath, waiting to see if this was war or something worse. The ships opened slowly, and from the sky descended warriors unlike anything humans had ever seen. They were tall, armored women with skin that shimmered like metal and eyes glowing like fire. Each step shook the ground. Their voices were sharp, full of pride. They called themselves the Valkyrie, warrior women of the stars. Their laughter echoed through the cities as they spoke to the human leaders. "Earth is weak," one of them shouted. Her voice carried across the sky. "You live soft lives. Your men are fragile. Your spirit is broken." The crowd below burned with anger, but none dared to step forward. The alien women stood proud, mocking Earth before all who listened. "We came not for war," their leader said, tall with hair of silver flame. "But for sport we will test your strength if even one human can stand against us. Then perhaps your world is not just a nest of cowards." The leaders of Earth looked at one another in silence. Soldiers trembled. They had weapons, yes, but weapons were not the challenge. This was not a war between armies. This was a test between souls, and no one wanted to be the first to face humiliation. Then from the edge of the crowd a man stepped forward. He was not a soldier, not a general, not even tall. He wore simple clothes, his hands calloused from work, his eyes calm. He looked ordinary. Yet when he walked, the ground seemed to welcome him. The alien women looked at him and laughed. "This is your champion? This small one?" they said with cruel joy. "He has no armor, no weapon, no strength." But the man did not answer. He simply raised his head and looked into the fire-bright eyes of the alien leader. And in that silence, something stirred. Some of the warrior women frowned, not knowing why his steady gaze unsettled them. The human leaders whispered urgently, "Do not do this. You cannot win. You will bring shame to Earth." But the man only smiled and said, "Shame is to kneel before mockery, not to stand and try." The words spread quickly, carried by the wind, by the ears of every human listening, and suddenly there was hope. A spark against the darkness of the alien laughter. The alien leader narrowed her burning eyes. "Then so be it, human. Tomorrow you will face us in the arena before all the stars, and we will show your world how easily a man breaks." She raised her spear to the sky, and lightning answered her. The crowd gasped in fear. Still the man did not flinch. He bowed his head lightly, not in surrender, but in respect to the challenge, and turned to walk back into the crowd. People stared at him with wide eyes. Whispers followed him. Who is he? Why does he not fear? The alien ships closed their hatches, vanishing back into the sky, leaving the world trembling with what tomorrow would bring. Across Earth, screens lit up with the image of the man who dared to step forward. Some called him a fool. Others called him brave. But all knew the fate of human pride now rested on his shoulders. That night, as cities fell silent, the man stood alone beneath the stars. He looked up at the alien lights glowing in the distance, his face calm, his heart steady. He whispered to himself, "They do not know what it means to be human." And in that quiet moment, even the stars seemed to pause, as if waiting for what would come when dawn brought the challenge of the stars. The next morning came heavy with silence. Across Earth, people stopped their work and waited. Every screen, every channel, every radio spoke only of one thing: the human who had stepped forward. His face was everywhere, yet no one knew his name. Some said he was a farmer. Others said he was a soldier who had thrown away his uniform. But no one truly knew. The sky cracked open again as the alien ships descended. This time they carried the human with them. Taken into their craft while the world watched, he did not resist. He walked calmly, as if he was not stepping into the jaws of giants. The Valkyrie ships roared into the stars, carrying him away, the world below holding its breath, waiting for the moment when the battle would be seen by all. The alien warriors laughed among themselves, their voices like thunder rolling through metal halls. "This one will not last a minute," one of them sneered. "He will break before the crowd even cheers." They took him to their homeworld, a planet of fire and steel. Their cities rose like spears into the sky. Their banners waved with colors of blood and gold, and at the heart of it stood the grand arena, vast, ancient, built from stone older than their empire. Tens of thousands of Valkyrie warrior women filled the seats, their cheers shaking the sky. The sound was like a storm. They came not to watch a battle, but to watch a humiliation. In the center of the arena. The ground split open, and from beneath came weapons, blades taller than the man, hammers heavier than his body, shields that could crush a human chest. The alien leader stood above it all, her silver hair blazing like fire in the light. She raised her spear and spoke, her voice carrying to every corner. Behold the human, weak and soft. He dares to call himself a fighter. Let us see what Earth calls strength. The crowd laughed, a cruel sound that shook the air. They pushed the man forward, placing weapons before him. Blades that hummed with alien energy, guns that pulsed like living hearts. He looked at them. For only a moment, then he stepped away, his hands empty. The crowd gasped, then roared with laughter. He is too afraid to touch them, they jeered. He does not even know how to hold a blade. Their voices cut like knives. The man only stood still, quiet, his eyes not on the weapons but on the warriors themselves. One of the Valkyrie stepped down. A giant compared to him, her body wrapped in armor that burned with heat. She grinned, sharp teeth flashing. "You will kneel before me, little earthling," she said, then charged, her steps shaking the ground, dust rising around her like a storm. The man did not move. Not until the very last moment, when her massive fist came down. He stepped aside. The punch slammed into the stone with a crack like thunder. The ground split. The warrior stumbled, and, before she could rise, he moved again, swift, sharp, striking her balance, sending her crashing down before the crowd. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then a roar of disbelief shook the arena. The Valkyrie warriors stared with wide eyes. The man stood calmly, breathing slow, his hands still empty. The fallen warrior rose with fury, shame burning in her glowing eyes. She charged again, faster, stronger, but the human's movements were sharper still. He was not faster in muscle, but faster in thought. He read her like an open book. Every step, every strike. He turned against her until again she fell, this time harder. The crowd was no longer laughing, their voices cracked into shouts of confusion. "How is this possible?" they asked one another. "He is small, he is weak, yet she cannot touch him." The alien leader narrowed her eyes, her amusement fading. "Enough," she growled, her voice cutting through the noise. She signaled another warrior, larger, crueler, armed with a blade that shone like fire. The warrior woman stepped into the arena with a smile of pure hunger. The human looked at her and bowed his head slightly, not mocking but showing respect to the fight. The Valkyrie in the stands murmured, confused. They had expected fear. They had expected begging. But this man showed neither. He stood as if this was his home, as if the arena belonged to him. The battle began again, and the world of humans, watching from their screens, leaned closer. They could see it now, the way he moved, the way he used no weapon, no armor, only his body and his will. And with every clash, the truth spread like fire. The human was not here to win with strength. He was here to show something greater. The Valkyrie leader clenched her spear tighter. The laughter of her people had ended. Their eyes no longer held only pride. Now there was something else. Fear. And high above, in the great towers of the alien city, whispers began. Perhaps Earth is not weak after all. The human stood alone in the arena, the dust settling around him, his shadow long against the burning sun. He did not raise his arms in victory. He did not smile. He only waited, calm, steady, ready for the next challenger. And in that silence, the mocking of the alien crowd began to change, from laughter to questions, from questions to doubt, and soon, from doubt to respect. The challenge had only just begun, but the seed of fear was already planted in the hearts of the warrior women. The air in the grand arena grew heavier with silence. The Valkyrie women who once laughed now leaned forward in their seats, their burning eyes fixed on the small human who stood alone on the cracked stone floor. He carried no weapon, no shield, only the calmness of his breath and the fire of his spirit. The first warrior had already fallen, humiliated before the crowd, but now the second stood ready, a giant compared to the man, her armor glowing with heat, her blade a shining arc of fire. She was known among her people as Soraka the Iron Flame, a name spoken with fear even among her sisters. She looked down at the human with a grin that promised destruction. "You will not dodge me, little earthling," she said, her voice sharp as the edge of her blade. "I will break your bones and scatter your dust across this arena." The crowd roared with approval, the thunder of thousands shaking the walls. The human gave no reply. He simply bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect, and then raised his eyes again, calm, steady, not shaken by the storm of voices or the fire dancing along her blade. His silence was louder than any word. The horn sounded, a deep ancient cry that marked the beginning of battle. Soraka charged forward with terrifying speed, her blade cutting through the air with a scream of fire. The heat rippled across the arena, but the human did not move until the last possible breath, and when he did, he was no longer where she thought. The crowd gasped. Soraka's blade struck only stone, sparks flying as the ground cracked under her strike. The human was behind her, his movements sharp, clean, as if he could see the path before it happened. She turned quickly, rage in her glowing eyes, and swung again, faster, harder. The man ducked low, his body bending with perfect timing. The blade passed inches above him, and before Soraka could lift it again, he struck. Not with force, but with precision. His palm hit the joint of her armor, her balance broke, her knees bent, and with a twist of his weight, he sent her crashing to the floor. The arena went silent, thousands of Valkyrie mouths open in shock. Soraka the Iron Flame was on the ground, her blade skidding across the stone. The human stepped back, giving her space to rise, his face calm, his hands still open. Soraka roared with fury. Shame burning through her pride, she grabbed her weapon and rose, her movements faster now, desperate. She struck again and again, a storm of fire and steel, the sound of her blade clashing against the air like thunder. Yet every strike missed, every slash cut only stone and dust. The human moved like water, flowing where she could not reach, every motion simple, every step precise, and with each failed strike, the crowd grew restless, their laughter gone, replaced with unease. How does he do this? Voices whispered. He has no weapon, no armor, yet he stands. Finally, Soraka swung with all her strength, her blade a blazing arc that split the very ground, but her strike carried her too far, her chest open, her balance broken. In that moment, the human stepped forward, his hand pressed gently against her chest plate. A push. Simple, almost soft, yet enough to send her staggering backward. Her feet tangled, and she fell again, this time with her armor cracking against the stone. The arena gasped, then roared, not with laughter but with anger and disbelief. The alien leader's face grew dark, her silver eyes narrowing as she gripped her spear tighter. Soraka lay on the ground, her pride shattered. She tried to rise, but her strength faltered. She dropped her weapon, and for the first time in her life, she whispered the words of defeat. "I yield." Her voice cracked, her pride broken. The human looked down at her, then turned his gaze back to the crowd. He said nothing. He did not raise his hands. He did not smile. He simply stood, breathing steady, calm as the stone beneath him. The Valkyrie women shifted in their seats, the unease spreading like fire. This was no trick, no accident. Twice now their warriors had fallen. Twice now the human had shown not cruelty but control, not rage but will, and that frightened them more than strength ever could. From the stands, another warrior woman rose, larger than Soraka, her armor covered in spikes, her eyes glowing. With hunger for battle, she leapt into the arena, her voice carrying across the air. "You will not make me fall, earthling," she roared. "I will crush the breath from your body." The crowd cheered again, trying to bury their fear in noise, but their voices shook, uncertain. The human only turned to face his next opponent, his face calm, his stance unbroken, and as the sun burned above the arena, casting long shadows across the cracked floor, the truth began to whisper in the hearts of the Valkyrie. Maybe the human was not strong because of muscle or weapons. Maybe his strength was something they could not yet understand. The first clash was over, but it was only the beginning. The test of Earth had just begun, and already the unshakable pride of the warrior women was starting to break. The arena had fallen into uneasy silence. The human stood in the center of the cracked stone floor, his chest rising slowly with each calm breath. Around him the Valkyrie warriors shifted in their seats, their eyes no longer burning with laughter but with a strange new fire. Doubt. Two of their proud sisters had fallen, not from brute strength, not from weapons, but from the strange will of the human who carried nothing in his hands. He did not roar with pride, he did not celebrate. He simply stood steady, as if the battles meant nothing, as if he was waiting for something greater. The Valkyrie leader raised her spear, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Enough games, send the next," she commanded, her eyes narrowing at the small figure below. Her pride demanded answers. She would test this man until the truth was revealed. From the ranks of the warriors came three at once, tall, broad, armed with spears of burning light, their armor heavy, their steps shaking the ground. The crowd roared, their voices like thunder. "3 against 1, they shouted. "This will end quickly." The human did not move, his eyes steady, his hands open, as the three spread out to surround him. The first lunged with a spear, the tip glowing with deadly fire. The man sidestepped with simple grace. The weapon struck stone, sparks flying before the warrior could pull back. The man pressed his palm against her elbow. A twist, a pull, and she tumbled into the dust. The second came at him with a roar, swinging her weapon down with crushing force. The man turned his body. The strike hit nothing but air. He stepped close, too close for her to use her weapon, and with a simple push against her chest, her breath burst out as she stumbled backward, armor scraping across stone. The third tried to trap him, her spear spinning in wide arcs driving him toward the walls. The crowd cheered, certain she would corner him, but the man bent low, his movements smooth like flowing water. He slipped beneath the spinning weapon, his hand pressed lightly against her wrist, and with a twist the spear flew from her grasp, clattering across the arena. Gasps filled the air. 3 warriors had entered. 3 warriors had fallen. Not one of them had even touched him. The leader's eyes narrowed further, her pride burning. "Again," she ordered, her voice sharp, and from the shadows of the arena came others, warriors with blades that dripped with energy, shields that glowed with fire. One by one they stepped forward, some alone, some in pairs, testing him, challenging him, trying to crush the human spirit. The battles blurred into one another, a storm of strikes, roars, and dust. But again and again the man stood firm, his movements never wild, never desperate, always calm, always certain. He dodged where he must, blocked with precision, and when he struck, it was never cruel, always enough to end the fight but never to destroy. The crowd no longer mocked, their voices no longer carried laughter. Now they shouted in awe and fear and disbelief. "How is this possible?" they whispered. No human should stand against so many. Between battles the man stood tall, breathing steady, his eyes not on the warriors, but on the sky above. He did not look like a victor. He did not look like a conqueror. He looked like a man carrying something deeper, something even the Valkyrie could not yet name. At last one of the fallen warriors shouted from the dust, her pride broken, her voice shaking. "What are you?" she demanded. "How can one so small defeat us?" The man turned his head, his calm voice carrying through the arena. "I am human," he said simply. "Strength is not in weapons or size, it is in spirit. It is in the heart that refuses to break." The words spread like fire, echoing across the stone walls, and though the crowd tried to deny them, many felt their hearts shift, their pride bending under the weight of his truth. The Valkyrie leader's face twisted with anger. She would not allow her people's spirit to be broken. She raised her spear high, her voice roaring across the arena. "Enough of this," she cried. "Bring forth the champions, the strongest. Among us, the shields of our people." The crowd roared again, their voices filled with fury and desperation, and from the gates at the edge of the arena came new figures, taller, stronger, wrapped in armor darker than night. These were not ordinary warriors. These were the champions, chosen for their unmatched strength. The human turned his gaze toward them, his eyes calm, his body steady. He did not step back. He did not tremble. He whispered only to himself. Words no one else could hear. Let them come. The crowd leaned forward, the tension so heavy it felt like the air itself might break. The champions stepped onto the stone floor, their eyes burning, their weapons glowing, and the arena trembled with the promise of the greatest clash yet. The tests of the strong were not over. They had only begun, and the fate of pride, of honor, of humanity itself, balanced on the shoulders of one man who refused to kneel. The champions stood before the human, their armor black as night, their weapons glowing with power older than empires. They were the pride of the Valkyrie, warriors who had never once been defeated. Their very names carried fear through the stars. The crowd roared, their voices filled with anger, pride, and desperation. This was not just a battle now. It was a war for honor. The human looked at them calmly, his chest rising and falling with slow breaths. He had fought many already. His body carried marks of dust and strain, yet his eyes remained steady, clear, unbroken. The Valkyrie leaders leaned forward, their silver eyes sharp, their hearts demanding an answer. How was this possible? What was his secret? The horn sounded, a cry of war that shook the stone walls. The first champion charged, her weapon a massive hammer that glowed with molten heat. The crowd screamed her name. She swung with a force that cracked the ground, but the human moved just before the strike. His body bending, his feet sliding, the hammer smashed into nothing. Before she could pull it free, the man placed his hand against her arm, his movement soft, precise, a twist, a push, and the great warrior stumbled, falling to one knee. The crowd gasped, their cheers breaking into shouts of disbelief. The second champion leapt into the air, her spear like a streak of fire, aiming for his heart. The human rolled across the stone, rising again. With quiet grace, the spear struck the ground where he had stood. The stone shattered, dust rose, but the man was untouched. The champions roared with fury. They attacked together, their weapons a storm of fire and steel. The crowd screamed with every clash, the air burned with energy. Yet the human did not fall. His movements were too sharp, too careful. He flowed between strikes like water between rocks, never wasting strength, always striking at the right moment. One by one the champions faltered, their pride breaking, their weapons falling. The crowd could no longer laugh. Their voices shook. Fear spread through their ranks. And the Valkyrie, leader's face darkened with rage. She stood and shouted, her voice echoing across the arena. Enough, human, enough of tricks, tell us. Where does your strength come from? The man turned his gaze toward her, his voice calm but heavy, carried across the silence. You think strength is in size, in weapons, in blood spilled, he said. But true strength is not in the arm. It is in the spirit. The crowd murmured, confused. Some laughed bitterly, but many listened, their hearts unsettled. The human continued, his words flowing like quiet thunder. We are human, we fall, we bleed, we break, but always we rise again. Our spirit grows from pain, from loss, from love. We fight not for pride, not for power, but for those we protect, for the ones we love, and that is strength no weapon can break. The words struck deeper than any blade. The Valkyrie warriors looked at one another, their glowing eyes shifting, their pride shaking. Many had fought, only for honor, for conquest, for victory. They had never thought of strength as something born of love, of sacrifice. The Valkyrie leader gripped her spear tighter, her silver hair blazing in the sun. Lies, she spat. Pretty words to hide weakness. Yet her voice trembled, her pride cracking under the weight of his truth. The human bowed, his head lightly, not mocking, but in quiet respect. Test me again, he said, and I will rise again. Test me until your arms break, until your pride breaks, and still I will rise, because I fight with more than muscle, I fight with heart. The arena grew heavy with silence. The champions, beaten, lay in the dust, their armor cracked, their weapons scattered. The crowd no longer roared, no longer laughed. They sat in stunned stillness, staring at the small man who stood unbroken. And in that silence, whispers began to grow. Whispers that spread like fire through dry grass. Perhaps he's right, some said softly. Perhaps strength is not what we thought. The Valkyrie leader felt her chest tighten, a feeling she had not known in all her years of war. It was not anger, not pride. It was fear. Fear that her people's unshakable truth was crumbling. Fear that one small human had shown them a strength greater than theirs. She stepped forward, her spear glowing brighter, her voice shaking the very air. "Then let me test you myself," she said, her words sharp, her pride burning. "Let me see if your spirit can stand against me." The crowd gasped. Their leader, herself stepping into the arena. This was no longer a sport, no longer a test. It was the breaking point of pride, of truth, of everything they believed. The human raised his eyes to her, steady, calm. He gave a single nod. "Then come," he said, his voice soft but unshaken. The arena shook with cries, the crowd torn between fear and excitement. The strongest Valkyrie, their leader, would fight. The human, the battle that would decide everything, was about to begin. And above them all, the stars themselves seemed to watch, as if the universe waited to see what truth would stand when pride and spirit finally clashed. The arena was silent as the Valkyrie leader stepped down from her throne, her silver hair blazing like fire in the sun, her armor carved with marks of battles no one dared to count. She was the strongest among her people, the undefeated spear of the Valkyrie, the one who had led wars across galaxies. Her name was whispered with fear in countless worlds. She walked with slow steps, each one echoing across the cracked stone. The crowd did not cheer this time. They held their breath, for they knew what this battle meant. If she fell, then their pride, their history, their very spirit would fall with her. The human stood waiting, his body marked with dust and sweat. Yet his eyes remained steady, calm as the still sea before a storm. He did not lift a weapon. He did not take an aggressive stance. He only opened his hands, showing once more that he would face her with nothing but himself. The Valkyrie leader stopped before him, her spear burning with light. She looked down at him with eyes like molten silver. "You have humiliated my people," she said, her voice sharp as thunder. "You have made us doubt what we are, but I will end this. I will break you, and I will remind the stars that the Valkyrie cannot fall." The man bowed his head lightly, his calm voice rising just enough to be heard. "If I fall, then it will be with truth, but if you fall, it will be because pride is weaker than spirit." The words cut deep. The crowd shifted uneasily, their glowing eyes flickering with unrest. The horn sounded, and the battle began. The leader charged with terrifying speed, her spear flashing like lightning. The ground shook under her steps. She struck with power meant to end worlds. The man moved at the last instant, his body twisting aside. The spear slammed into the stone, cracks spreading like rivers. She spun, her spear a blur of light, striking again and again, each blow heavy enough to break a mountain. Yet the human flowed between them, his steps simple, his movements sharp. He did not match her strength. He matched her rhythm. He turned her fury into empty air. The crowd gasped as the duel unfolded. The greatest Valkyrie warrior against a man who carried nothing. The arena rang with the clash of stone, the cries of breath, the silence between each strike. At last, the leader roared, her pride burning. She swept her spear low, forcing him to leap, and in midair she struck again, her weapon slicing toward him with deadly speed. The crowd shouted, certain it was the end. But at the last breath the man twisted. His hand brushed against the spear's shaft, turning it just enough. The blade missed, carving only dust. He landed softly, his feet steady, his body unbroken. The leader snarled with fury. "Why will you not fall?" she cried, her voice echoing with rage and desperation. The man looked at her, his voice calm, almost sorrowful. "Because I fight not to win, but to endure. I fight not for myself, but for something greater." Her strikes grew wilder, heavier, her pride driving her forward. But the more she struck, the more the truth became clear. Her strength was immense, but it was empty, built on power and pride. His strength was quiet, unshakable, built on will. Blow after blow, she faltered, her breath growing heavier, her arms slower. The crowd watched in silence, their pride breaking with every moment. The man stepped close and with one soft movement, his hand pressed against her chest plate, not to harm, but to stop her. She stumbled back, her spear slipping from her grip. Clattering onto the stone, her knees hit the ground. The arena gasped. The strongest of the Valkyrie had fallen, not slain, not broken, but humbled. The leader lifted her eyes, glowing with tears that no one had ever seen before. She whispered, through her pride, "What are you, human? Why do you not destroy? Why do you not finish me?" The man bowed his head, his calm voice carrying like wind. "Because true strength is not in breaking, it is in holding. It is not in ending life, it is in protecting it." The words echoed through the arena, and for the first time in their long history, the Valkyrie were silent, truly silent. The pride they had carried for centuries cracked before the truth of one man's spirit. The leader bowed her head, her pride shattered, her voice soft yet heavy. "Then today, the Valkyrie, learn. Today we see a strength greater than our own." The crowd, thousands strong, lowered their heads, the sound of armor shifting like waves in the sea. Respect, not mockery, filled the air. They had seen their leader fall. But more than that, they had seen a truth they could not deny. The human stood still. Not smiling, not gloating, he simply looked at the sky above, his voice soft enough for the wind to carry. This is what it means to be human. And in that moment, the unshakable pride of the Valkyrie was broken, not by power but by spirit, not by cruelty but by truth. The arena was still, the dust settling slowly across the broken stone. The human stood tall in silence, his body weary yet unshaken, his spirit glowing brighter than the sun above. Before him knelt the Valkyrie leader, the strongest of her people, her silver hair tangled, her spear lying abandoned on the ground, her pride shattered but her heart open for the first time. The crowd of thousands, once full of laughter and scorn, had fallen into silence, every glowing eye fixed on the small man who had done the impossible. The warrior women who had mocked humanity now stared in awe, their pride broken, their hearts uncertain, their voices stolen by truth. The leader raised her head, her voice, trembling yet strong. "Human, you have defeated not only our warriors but our pride. You stood alone where no one dared. You rose where many would have fallen, and you did so without cruelty, without arrogance. Tell me why." The man looked at her, his face calm, his words soft yet carrying like thunder. "Because true strength is not in crushing others, it is in lifting them. I did not fight to humiliate. I fought to show you that spirit, the spirit of humanity, cannot be mocked, cannot be broken. It rises even when the body falls." The words flowed through the arena, and the Valkyrie women felt them strike deeper than any blade. Many lowered their heads, ashamed of their laughter, ashamed of their pride, for in one man they had seen a strength greater than armies. The Yai leader pressed her fist to the ground, a sign of respect among her people, her voice carrying with honesty. "Then today, the Valkyrie bowed to earth, not in defeat, but in respect. You are no longer weak in our eyes. You are brothers of the warriors, sisters of the strong. Your spirit has taught us what ours had forgotten." The crowd, thousands of proud warrior women, rose together, their armor clashing like thunder, and as one, they struck their fists against their chests, the sound echoing across the skies. It was not mockery this time. It was respect. The human bowed his head lightly. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply stood as he always had, calm, steady, carrying only the truth of his spirit. The people of Earth, watching from distant screens, wept with pride, for they had seen one of their own stand where no one thought possible, and win not by destruction, but by heart. The Valkyrie leader turned to her people, her silver eyes shining. "Let the stars carry this truth," she declared. "Earth is no longer a world of the weak. It is a world of spirit. And we, the Valkyrie, will no longer mock them. We will stand with them. We will honor them." The crowd roared, not with laughter, but with pride, their voices shaking the skies, the sound of respect, the sound of a new bond forged. The human looked at the leader, his calm words soft. "Then perhaps there is hope. Not for war, but for unity. For strength is not in standing apart, but in standing together. The Valkyrie leader nodded, her voice firm. From this day, Earth is no longer alone. The alien ships carried the human back to his world, the journey quiet yet heavy with meaning. When he stepped once more onto Earth's soil, the people erupted with joy, their voices carrying across cities, his face shining across every screen. The simple man who had stood against giants and turned their laughter into respect. He walked among his people as he always had. Simple, steady, no crown upon his head, no throne beneath his feet. But in every heart he was more than a hero. He was the symbol of what it meant to be human. And across the galaxy, the story spread, whispered in halls of kings, carried in songs of wanderers, told even among enemies, the tale of the man who stood with nothing but his spirit, who broke the pride of warriors, who taught that strength was not in power, but in heart. In the Valkyrie world, the warriors trained not with pride alone, but with new purpose. They remembered his words. They remembered his calm. They remembered the moment when pride fell and respect rose. They called him not enemy, not rival, but brother of warriors, a title that carried more weight than any crown. The human never sought glory. He returned to his life quietly, but his story lived, carved into the stars, carried in the whispers of galaxies, proof that humanity was not weak, proof that spirit could shake empires, proof that one man could change everything. And so the world remembered, so the galaxy remembered, that when pride laughed, spirit answered, and when the strongest mocked, a human stood. And from that moment, the Valkyrie and Earth walked no longer as strangers but as allies, bound by respect, bound by the strength of a single man's heart.